Hi guys, it's God's comic Brad Stine. Are you an atheist? Have you ever noticed all the evil, destruction, disease, and chaos in the world? Huh. What if I told you I know where it comes from? And when I tell you who's responsible, you won't like it. Stop crying. Come on in. One of the top 3 knocks by atheists about why they don't believe in God is, if he existed, why would he allow evil in the world? I mean, they say that if God was loving, he would never allow cancer in children, or wars among nations, and slavery and rapes amongst the innocent, right? On the surface, that kind of makes sense too, doesn't it? I mean, even humans, when they see something evil or harmful being done to someone else, they'll oftentimes try to defend them, right? So if a human being believes that's just the way to live, wouldn't the God who gave us justice in the first place be obligated even more so? What the atheist always leaves out of that equation is something they've never really considered: the very fact that they believe it is their right and their entitlement to even be able to ask that question. You see, any question about God assumes that, 1, we're rational creatures capable of assessing a situation logically, and 2, that we can differentiate between good and evil in the first place. You see, if evil actually exists, and all you have to do is look at human history to find out, then that has to mean that goodness exists as well. See, we all want goodness, clearly, but there is no such attribute unless someone can deviate from it, because evil is the opposite of goodness. So you can only have the possibility of blaming God for allowing evil if every time you experience goodness, you are thanking God for the pleasure of that experience. But no one does that, do they? It's actually the opposite. Whenever someone does experience a good thing by giving it or receiving it, who do we give credit to? Ourselves. Why? Because we intrinsically realize that we could have chosen to do the opposite. That is why we have a thing called a hero, for example, because someone found themselves in a dangerous situation and they chose to risk their life to save someone else. In other words, something heroic only carries weight because we could have chosen to do the opposite. That, by the way, is what the atheist treasures the most: his autonomy. To be able to choose not to believe in God. I mean, if God made you believe in him, then you didn't actually believe in him at all. Instead, you were just programmed to respond a certain way. So keep in mind that when someone does an evil thing, it isn't God doing it. It is the individual. So God allows evil people to do evil things. Otherwise, we wouldn't be autonomous or free. We would just complain God is making us be nice all the time. There are 1,000 babies butchered at Planned Parenthood every day. Why don't you do something about it? Oh, you don't care. Then you're evil. Why doesn't God make you care? Make you do right? But suddenly you wouldn't like that, would you? Why is there cancer in children? Always strikes me as an odd way to frame things. They never frame it, why does God allow cancer in middle-aged accountants from Tupelo, as though maybe he deserved it. No, it's always, why does God allow cancer in children? It's as though they are less worthy of cancer. But a 30-year-old is the same child who has simply been alive longer, right? Couldn't a 90-year-old say, why does God allow cancer in a 30-year-old? The children represent innocence to us. And since we all can remember moments of childhood, there's also the reality that we were once vulnerable and ripe for abuse. Notice, though, that the atheist is making a leap of faith. They're indicating that humans have some sort of innate worth by which they should live a life unaltered by disease or sudden death. They are giving a superior moral value to humans that they don't give to animals, and yet they insist that's all we really are. No one is complaining. Why does God allow tigers to hunt and eat an antelope alive, even a child antelope? We have this instinct as humans that there is something morally unbalanced and unjust in the untimely death of a child. If they were true to their materialism, they would remember that they believe death ends all consciousness for eternity. So, thus, not only does a cancer-riddled child have no concern for their death once they've died, since they'll never be aware they existed anyways, but those who complain about the deaths and blame God also will die soon and move into eternal unconsciousness. So in the scheme of things, to be consistent with your nihilistic worldview, you should be saying, who gives a crap if a 4-year-old dies of cancer? The dead kid doesn't care about it and leaves more food on earth for me and one less kid crying on an airplane. Atheists is constantly behaving and reasoning in ways that would only be of any value if there was, in fact, eternal life, ultimate justice, and punishment for doing evil. Otherwise, as the religion of Darwinism teaches, life is simply meaningless. Now, here is where I have to bring up something I have observed for years, since I've been engaging atheists in dialogue. Okay, what I'm about to say will at first sound like some kind of insult, but it isn't, I promise. What I'm about to say is my actual experience dealing with the new atheist in real time. Are you ready? Okay. Atheists are literally incapable of grasping the concept that if they believe life in the meta sense is meaningless, then everything they do every day is meaningless as well. Now, that might seem simple to grasp, but it isn't for the atheists. They can't grasp it. Why? Because they've trained themselves to believe that only material things exist. They believe in a closed system of the universe that contains all the properties of matter, energy, time. That's it. There is nothing transcendent or immaterial that exists. There is nothing on the other side of what we can grasp using our 5 senses and our intellect. And so the concept of the immaterial or God, right, simply can't exist. Now, there are many arguments to defeat this concept, but that's not what I'm going to speak to you today. No, today I only want to focus on the reality that was reached by some very well-known atheists, I might add, who are much smarter and influential philosophically than Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris or Daniel Dennett. I'm talking about the David Humes, or perhaps who we would refer to as the father of modern atheism, Friedrich Nietzsche, as well as Bertrand Russell and others. Nietzsche, of course, was most famous for the concept God is dead, but what is usually ignored by the new atheism is the conclusion he reached after reaching the dead God conclusion. He said that if there's no God, all things are permissible. So what Nietzsche understood better than most modern atheists is Darwinism is true. We arrived on this planet without purpose or design, and there is no absolute truth either by which we can make sense of it all. Then cancer in children and wars and rapes and torture and murder are simply the way our bodies work. Some survive for a while without cancer. Others get cancer, which is just nature's way of weeding out the weak. As far as evil things humans do to each other, that's an illusion. And it's encoded in our brains as simply a way to survive. So if you're an atheist, let me make this very clear. You can no longer complain or be outraged about evil and disease and disasters and pain. It's simply the result of evolution and Darwinism. But if you can't shake the feeling that there ought to be justice, that there should be punishment for bad behaviors, and there should be some hopeful place of rest and peace for those who choose to humble themselves and put others in front of their own personal needs, desires, and survival. And you have just observed existentially it's one of the myriads of evidence for God that heretofore you claim didn't exist. You have just experienced the God of creation gently drawing you to the truth you have instinctively known all along, but were too filled with pride to accept. The reason evil exists is because you exist. God paid the price for that, by the way. Welcome to reality. The red pill isn't so bad after all, is it? But you better drink it down with a big glass of truth. This is God's Comic, Brad Stine. Remember, folks, you need the truth or you have nowhere to go. Oh, and PC free? It's liberty. You know, wouldn't it be evil if I went through all this trouble teaching you these things and you didn't go subscribe to my YouTube channel? It just says Brad Stine Has Issues. It's really simple. You use your fingers to say Brad Stine Has Issues on YouTube, and then you press subscribe, and that's it. But you give it to all of your friends and all your Facebook fans and friends and followers, and you go to my fan page and you follow that too, and you like it and you share it, and we build an army, and I will give you even more episodes and do even more things you can't even imagine, but I need your help. So you need to go subscribe or you're evil.